What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel for another episode of the Ask Me Anything series. I hope you all had a fantastic weekend. I didn't upload an episode of this series last week. I feel like sometimes the episodes are better when there's 2 weeks in between them, just because there's more things to talk about that we haven't already covered. And there's definitely a lot of interesting questions this week. As always, I want to say thank you to every single one of you who took the time to go and leave a question on the post. Even the ones that aren't featured in the video, I appreciate them all the same. I read every single one. If you guys want another episode next week, instead of waiting 2 weeks in between episodes again, then be sure to drop this video a like. That's the best way to let me know that you enjoyed. So with that all being said, let's go ahead and get started. This first question comes from Bo, who says, what are your thoughts on Jeff Blashill's job security? The Red Wings seem to be ready to turn the corner, but the wheels have really fallen off of late. Big fan of the content. I miss Nyquist in the winged wheel jersey, and I still have his jersey. I agree, I miss Nyquist as well, and thank you for the kind words. If you followed me on Twitter, even just for the past couple of weeks, you'd probably know where I stand on Jeff Blashill's job security. The Red Wings have just gotten completely embarrassed and blown out way too many times this season for a team that's where they're at in the standings. I know a lot of people say there's no point in changing your coach mid-season when you're where the Red Wings are at, because at this point in the season you probably don't want to win too many more games because you want to give yourself the best chance at a top draft pick. But from my point of view, it kind of seems like the Red Wings have quit on Jeff Blashill. There was a point in the Arizona game, I think it was 6-1 Coyotes at this point. Blashill finally called the timeout. He was yelling at the bench and literally nobody was even looking at him or paying any attention to him. I just feel like the longer that Jeff Blashill stays behind the bench, the longer some of the bad habits that the Red Wings have are going to stick around. I really don't think there's any chance he gets fired during this season. I just don't think that's something Steve Yzerman will do, and he's still under contract for next season as well, so who knows what's going to happen. I honestly wouldn't be surprised to see him back next year. Moving along now, this next question comes from Emmeline, who says, with recent first overall picks like Hughes and Lafreniere taking a little while to really get their game to translate into the NHL, and Power deciding not to go straight into the NHL, do you think first overalls taking time to develop more before coming into the league might be something we see more often? This is a really interesting question, and my answer would be the team should just make that decision based off of what they see from the prospecting training camp and whether they deem that player ready to play in the NHL right away or not. I feel like teams kind of get distracted by the fact that the player was a first overall pick and kind of just have them as a shoo-in in the lineup right away, when maybe sometimes certain players need a little bit more time to develop, whether it's back playing in junior, playing some time in the American Hockey League. And like you said, with recent examples of Lafreniere and Hughes taking a little bit more time to get their footing in the NHL, and Owen Power making the decision himself to play another year in college, maybe this is something that we'll see happen more often, over the next 5-10 years. And the next question we have comes from Anthony D'Amato, who says, what do you think the Ducks could get back in a trade for Lindholm or Manson, and should they trade either of them? Based on where the Ducks are at this point in the season, they've kind of fell out of the playoff race a little bit. They're only 2 games over 500 now. I definitely think it would be really smart to look to trade at least one of them. The Ducks are going to be a really interesting team at the deadline because you have players like Rickard Rakell along with the likes of Josh Manson and Hampus Lindholm. I feel like Hampus Lindholm is the most interesting name because for him, it's got to be pretty tempting to, test the open market when you consider the type of contracts that, big name free agent defensemen have got over the past couple years. Alex Pietrangelo, Torrey Krug, Dougie Hamilton as well just last offseason. So Hampus Lindholm is probably the guy I think the Ducks should prioritize moving, because losing him for nothing would hurt the most of those two, I feel like. And as far as what the Ducks could get in return for Hampus Lindholm, you'd have to think it would be a pretty sizable package. I mean, look at last year's trade deadline. The Columbus Blue Jackets got a first-round pick from the Lightning for David Savard. I would say Hampus Lindholm is a much superior player than David Savard. So when it comes to Hampus Lindholm, I definitely feel like the conversation would start with a first-round pick and like a decent prospect. Moving along now, this next question comes from Buddy Porter, who says, has Jake DeBrusk raised his trade value with his recent play, and do the Bruins use him as a rental for the playoffs and trade him at the draft? Love the vids. Thank you for the kind words. I would definitely say 100% Jake DeBrusk has raised his value at least a little bit with his recent play. I feel like it's kind of just came since his trade request. Actually, that's when we've seen a pretty sizable improvement in his game and in his production. Obviously, he struggled last season, had a really poor start to this season, but now you look and he's got 15 goals. There's a good chance he scores 20 goals this season for the second time in his career. He's still under 25, going to be an RFA at the end of the season. He's definitely a really intriguing player. In terms of if I think the Bruins will trade him this season or wait till the offseason, it all just comes down to what the market is for Jake DeBrusk. I really can't see the Bruins moving him at the deadline for like a couple of draft picks and maybe a prospect. They're going to want something in return that makes them a better team. They're in a position right now where they're trying to compete for a Stanley Cup. The only way I can see them trading DeBrusk mid-season like this is if, they get a roster player in return who they think makes them better, or maybe they could package Jake DeBrusk DeBrusk in some type of deal to go after one of the bigger name rentals at the deadline. If I had to put odds on it though, I would say like 80% chance he doesn't get traded mid-season and 20% chance he does. I feel like the most likely thing is we see him get traded, like you said, at the draft or just some point in the offseason. The next question we have comes from Noah, who says, do you think the Canucks have a legit chance at the playoffs? What do they have to do to get there? Love the vids, by the way. Thank you for the kind words. I remember in one of the earlier Ask Me Anythings of the season, it was right after the Canucks fired Travis Green and went under that initial win streak under Bruce Boudreau. I had a question just like this in the Ask Me Anything. Basically, I was like, it's cool that they're doing this under Bruce Boudreau. They should make things interesting, but I really don't think they have a legit chance to make it. They just had too big of a hole to dig out of. But now you look at things, especially with Vegas playing as poor as they're playing and Vancouver staying hot under Bruce Boudreau. I think they're 12 or 13 games over 500 under him. Now it seems that the Canucks definitely do have a legit shot to make it. If they would have beat Tampa Bay last night, they would have pulled to within 1 point of Vegas for the second wildcard spot. Obviously they lost, but they're still only 3 points back of Vegas. They also have a game in hand. Things are looking incredibly interesting when it comes to the Western Conference wildcard race, which I'm all here for. I hope it goes right down to the wire, right down to the last day of the regular season, especially when you consider that the Eastern Conference playoff picture has been settled for like months now. And to answer the part of your question, what do they have to do to get into the playoffs? It's a pretty lame answer, but it's true. They just have to continue to play the way that they've been playing ever since Bruce Boudreau was hired. If they keep that up, they're going to put themselves in pretty good shape. Moving along now, this next question comes from Oilers fan 28, who says, with Fleury probably staying in Chicago, who do you think is the best goalie on the market? Also, what teams do you think should go after them? And thank you for the kind words. So for those of you who don't know, Fleury did say he would like to stay in Chicago. He doesn't want to uproot his family again, so he's probably not going to waive his no movement clause, which is completely understandable. So it looks like Marc-Andre Fleury is off the market. One goaltender that I think would be pretty interesting for a team to go after, one that wouldn't even really be a rental because he has a little bit of term left on his deal. He signed through the 2022-23 season, is Semyon Varlamov of the New York Islanders. Obviously, the Islanders are having an incredibly disappointing season. Varlamov was only 4-12-1 on the year, but he's still rocking a .912 save percentage, had a .929 last season. Varlamov is a very good goaltender, and I think would be a great solution for any team out there that's currently having goaltending problems, Toronto Maple Leafs. And from the Islanders' perspective, I feel like it makes sense for them to move on and try to cash in on Semyon Varlamov. I mean, he's 33 years old now. You know who your guy is right now and moving forward into the future, and that's Ilya Sorokin. So for me, Varlamov is definitely a guy that, especially now with Fleury off the market, the Islanders should test the market on, and I feel like there would be a good amount of teams interested. Moving on, this question comes from Verizon Gaming, who says, if Marty St. Louis was the coach at the start of the season, will the Habs be a playoff team? I'm going to be pretty blunt with this and say definitely not. Obviously, they've been a lot more of an exciting team and a much better team under Marty St. Louis, but they still would have had the same injury problems. They still would have been missing Carey Price and Shea Weber. Now, would they be higher in the standings at this point if St. Louis was the coach for the entire season? Yeah, probably, but definitely still not near the playoffs in my opinion. There's no way they would have finished ahead of Boston, Toronto, Florida, Tampa, any of those teams. Maybe at this point they would have been ahead of Philly, Buffalo, Ottawa, those teams, but definitely not a playoff team. Moving on now, we have a question from Caleb, who says, thoughts on the missed calls the other day, Chychrun on Matthews and Ovi on Hyman. This is something that I really wanted to talk about because it's one of the most annoying things, in my opinion, about the NHL. Game management by referees is so stupid. Like the Zach Hyman one was ridiculous. Basically, if you missed it, Zach Hyman was about to go down and score on the empty net, but Ovechkin literally put his stick in Hyman's midsection and pulled him back. It was literally the definition of a hook, and Hyman was skating through the neutral zone with the puck, going down to seal the game and score on the empty netter. Everyone on the ice was watching it. It's not like any of the refs didn't see it. They just didn't want to call it because they didn't want to end the game on a penalty. And then guess what happened? Washington went back the other way and tied the game with 0.8 seconds left. They got it to overtime. Edmonton still did end up winning in overtime, but the point is, by refs not making calls late in games, or in the Matthews Chychrun case in overtime because they don't want to decide the game off a penalty call, they're actively having an impact on the outcome of the game by not calling the penalty. It's not the ref's fault that Ovechkin hooked Zach Hyman. It's not the ref's fault that Jacob Chychrun held Austin Matthews, but it's their job to call that penalty. And again, by not calling the penalty because they don't want to impact the outcome of the game, they're literally impacting the outcome of the game. It's so stupid. This next question comes from Hugh Barkhurst, who says, does Igor Shesterkin have the Vezina trophy in the bag, or is there anyone else with a legitimate chance at winning it? I would definitely say at this point in the season, Shesterkin has it in the bag. I mean, there's a lot of goaltenders having great years, but Shesterkin is in the MVP conversation. I feel like at this point, him and Austin Austin Matthews are the front runners. For Shesterkin to not even win the Vezina at this point, I feel like he would have to really struggle from now to the end of the season, and based off of the way he's performed pretty much ever since coming into the NHL, but especially this season, I don't have any reason to believe that that's going to happen. Sure, he had a dud the other night against the St. Louis Blues where he allowed, I think, 6 goals, but that's going to happen here and there. Next up, this question comes from Hayden Hallett, who says, what would your top priority be if you were Kyle Dubas? Goaltending has been atrocious, D has been shaky. My opinion is goaltending, but would love to hear your thoughts. I'm right with you there. I think the number one priority should be to get a goaltender. There's definitely some injury concerns when it comes to Jack Campbell, but even when he was in the lineup and healthy playing for the past couple of months, he was playing very poor, and at this point it just seems like Peter Mrazek is a non-option for the Leafs. He's always been a goaltender that's kind of all over the place, and for some reason it just seems like he can never stay in his net. He's, very exaggerated in terms of his movement, and I feel like part of the reason it worked in Carolina, his style of play, is because obviously they have such a good D-core. They're really good at clearing the front of the net and, getting to the rebounds before the other team. But man, Peter Mrazek's style of play just does not fit with the Maple Leafs. It's been ugly for the past couple of weeks when he started, and it looked like he was going to have a good game in the Heritage Classic or Tim Hortons Classic, whatever they called it yesterday. The outdoor game against Buffalo, he started off pretty well, and overall I would say he had an okay game. It was definitely one of his better games recently, but he still let in just a ridiculous goal, a shot from the corner that just has no business going in on an NHL goaltender, and I know that happens to every goaltender. I mean, think about what Nedeljkovic did the other night. He batted the puck in his own net, but it seems like it's been happening with Peter Mrazek pretty much every game where he lets in at least 1 or 2 goals where you're like, man, if you want to have any chance in the playoffs, you need that save. So with the way Peter Mrazek is playing and the injury concerns with Jack Campbell, and even Jack Campbell when he's playing hasn't been very good, I definitely think getting a goaltender should be Dubas' number one priority. And now for the final question of today's episode, another Leafs question here from William Bennett. Will Austin Matthews have a 70-goal season in his career? He's been on pace for 65 the last 2 seasons. I'm going to be blunt with this one and say absolutely not. I mean, we haven't seen a 70-goal scorer in the NHL since Teemu Selanne's rookie season where he had 76, and I think McGillney had 76 that season as well. It was in the mid to late 90s. It's just not something that I think is ever going to happen again. Everything would have to go right. You could not have a cold streak. You could certainly not get suspended or go down with an injury for any period of time. However, I will say I definitely do believe Austin Matthews will probably have 1 or maybe 2 or more, a couple 60-goal seasons in his career. I mean, there's a good chance he does it this season. He is absolutely the best goal scorer in the NHL right now. You could definitely make the case that he's the best player in the NHL right now. So 60-goal season, yeah, but 70-goal season, I just don't think that's ever going to happen again. But that is going to wrap up today's episode of the Ask Me Anything series. Again, thank you so much to everyone who left a question on the post. I appreciate every single one of you guys. This series is so fun for me to do. And like I said at the start as well, if you'd like to see another episode next week, then be sure to drop this video a like. That is the best way to show your support. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all soon.